She's shown in portraits hanging in schools, courts, and prisons. Her image was printed on banknotes people hesitated to spend. But what you don't know is the scandal that erupted around this tiara inside Buckingham Palace itself. This piece was created as a gift, but who did it really belong to? And why did one of the queens refuse to wear it in full for almost 20 years? To this day, the jewelers at Garrett have never released the complete archives on this tiara, but a few records have leaked, and what they revealed explains a lot. Why the lilies, why the scrolls, and why one day it was dismantled only to be put back together again. And what happened when, after the death of Queen Elizabeth II, Camilla wore the tiara for the first time. The reaction was so intense, the palace press office even considered pulling the photos. But the most surprising part isn't that. The most surprising part is that today, almost anyone can come close to the legend. Not just see it, wear it. And while it might sound like fiction, by the end of this video, you'll understand it's entirely true. This is a story where beauty hides power, where a symbol gains authority, and where one of the most innocent-looking objects turns out to be deeper, more complex, and shockingly precise than any words. This is not just a piece of jewelry. It's a political gesture, an act of loyalty, and a mirror of an entire century. Stay with us to the end, because only there will you discover how you can touch the monarchy's jeweled memory with your own hands and feel that it is still alive. 1947. Britain is still recovering from the war. London is foggy, reserved, but in the air there is anticipation. The future queen, still Princess Elizabeth at the time, is preparing for her wedding. And in that moment, she receives a piece of jewelry that will change everything. Not a state gift, not just another gem from the royal vault, but something else, a gift from the people. The tiara wasn't presented by Parliament or the Prime Minister or a foreign monarch. It was given by women, not just subjects, but girls from across Britain and Ireland. Those who gathered funds, those who wanted to say more than words could express. This was an act of female solidarity, loyalty to the monarchy, and a belief in the future. The tiara presented to the princess wasn't just an ornament, it was a symbol of support during a difficult time, of a promise that even in chaos, there is still beauty, of a feeling that she would become the face of a new era. At the time of the gift, the tiara was already over 50 years old. It had passed through the hands of Queen Mary, Elizabeth's grandmother, and now a new owner. Young, composed, standing against the backdrop of post-war fog, she accepts the tiara, unaware that years later, this very piece will become the visual code of Elizabethan Britain. You don't yet know what this tiara looks like, but you're sure you've seen it dozens of times. In portraits, on banknotes, on stamps. Before you, not just diamonds. Before you, the future framed by the past. This is how the story begins, the story of the most recognizable tiara in Britain. But everything you know about it is just the surface. Because what lies ahead is the truth about transformation, symbolism, legacy, and the power that can't be seen but is felt by the entire world. Today, when people hear the name the Girls of Great Britain and Ireland tiara, most instantly think of Queen Elizabeth II, young, confident, timeless. But few ever stop to wonder, who were these mysterious girls whose name has been etched forever into the history of royal jewelry? The answer lies not in royal blood or courtly tradition, but in a far more touching and meaningful story. These girls weren't fictional figures or decorative wording added for charm. They were real women, Members of the aristocracy and the middle class, noble ladies and everyday citizens of the kingdom, all united by a single purpose. They weren't MPs, held no titles, and commanded no fleets, but with their hands and their initiative, they became the authors of the most human gesture in the history of Britain's monarchy. In 1893, as Princess Mary of Teck prepared to marry the future King George V, a special committee was formed. It brought together women from across Britain and Ireland, from countesses to governesses, from widows of veterans to young students. Each donated what she could afford, so that together they could commission a special wedding gift for the young bride, the girl who was destined to become queen. They chose a tiara, not a brooch, not a necklace, not a vase, but a headpiece, because it spoke of status, dignity, and most importantly, faith in the future of this woman. The tiara was meant to symbolize the people's trust in her, not only as a royal consort, but as a future pillar of the nation. It wasn't just a polite gesture, it was a deliberate, deeply considered act of recognition, approval, and support. One of those rare moments a royal household never forgets. When 54 years later, the same tiara passed into the hands of young Elizabeth, Mary's granddaughter, no one could have guessed just how symbolically perfect the gift would turn out to be. Everything those women had once poured into the tiara, their faith in the endurance of monarchy, their desire to pass on something personal, feminine, tender, and yet quietly powerful, all of it would come to life again in the reign of its second wearer. Elizabeth's wedding in 1947 took place during the bleak post-war years, when the nation was still clearing the rubble and it felt as though the royal family was held together only by duty. And in that moment, on her head appeared a tiara given by women of a century past to another young bride. As though old Britain, scarred and weary, was reaching out a hand to the new one, still believing in light. That single gesture from 1893 proved so powerful that the tiara, a symbol of love, power, and public devotion, was reborn. It became one of the defining visual codes of the British crown, and it marked the beginning of a chapter in which the tiara would become more than a family heirloom. It would become something far greater. And yet, the most fascinating part of its journey is still to come. In the heart of London, where shop windows still shimmer with reflections of history, the year was 1893, when the Guard Workshop received a very special commission. In an old leather-bound ledger embossed in gold, a discreet entry was made. Tiara with a diamond bandeau and scroll motif, topped with delicate pear-shaped pearls. A simple phrase in the reserved style of royal record-keeping, but behind those words lay a true revolution in jewelry design. By then, Guard was no ordinary jeweler. It was the official crown jeweler of the British monarchy. But this particular order required something beyond prestige. The craftsmen were asked to create a piece not just worthy of a future queen, but one that could evolve over decades, changing in shape and meaning as time moved on. The tiara was conceived as a flexible, multi-layered jewel made of detachable components that could transform as needed. Its construction allowed it to be worn as a full tiara for formal occasions, as a necklace for balls, or as a simple bandeau for more intimate events. It was a groundbreaking concept. The monarchy wouldn't just receive a static jewel, but a chameleon-like adornment, one that could adapt to any moment, mood, or era. At its core was a graceful diamond band decorated with delicate scrolls forming a wave-like pattern. Above it stood a row of vertical pearl drops, like light captured on the edge of air. These pearls weren't just embellishments, they gave the illusion of movement. It felt as though the tiara breathed, catching light and air like a symbol floating just above the earth. The jewelers at Gerard didn't just pour their skill into the design, they built it with purpose. Every element could be removed, rearranged, or replaced. It wasn't just a feat of technical brilliance. It was a vision of foresight. The understanding that this piece might outlive its first wearer, passing from generation to generation, adjusting itself to new queens, new styles, and new times. The craftsmen themselves called it the tiara with personality. It didn't dominate, it adapted. It didn't shout, yet it always drew the eye. Back in 1893, no one could have predicted how long this construction would endure, or how much its image would evolve. But even then, in its flawlessly assembled form, a silent question was already embedded: to leave it untouched, or to one day transform it. And that transformation? It would happen. But that is a story for the next chapter. When the tiara left the walls of the Gerard workshop, it immediately stepped onto the royal stage. Its first owner wasn't Elizabeth, as many assume, but her grandmother, Princess Mary of Teck, who married the future King George V in 1893. This refined, symbolic gift from the girls of Britain and Ireland was created especially for her, a gesture of approval and hope for a long and happy life at court. At first, Mary wore the piece in its full original glory, with its pearl drops, sparkling diamond bandeau, and signature scroll work. She appeared in it on the balconies of Buckingham Palace, at grand evening functions, and later in official portraits, where her image was meant to project composure, elegance, and royal authority. But the tiara's most radiant moment came at the 1902 coronation of Edward VII, where Mary, then Princess of Wales, stood before the world wearing this jewel. The tiara found itself on the cusp of eras, the rigid Victorian age behind, and a future of change just beginning. A little more than a decade passed. Now Queen, Mary reevaluated her connection to the tiara. In 1914, she approached Gerard with a request to modify its structure. The teardrop pearls were to be replaced with diamonds, making the composition lighter and more visually modern. She also instructed that the top portion, the so-called bandeau, be detached from the main frame, so it could be worn separately as a refined headband. This wasn't just an aesthetic shift, it was a practical, deliberate update that reflected the evolving image of womanhood in the early 20th century. The tiara, originally created as a symbol of youthful promise, had by now become an embodiment of mature power. And it was precisely because of these changes that it could keep living, regardless of historical context. Mary preserved its essence, but paved the way for adaptability, for a future where the tiara would no longer be just a relic of a royal wedding. And then, decades later, the jewel found its way into new hands. Elizabeth, still princess at the time, inherited the tiara from her grandmother in 1947. At first, she wore it sparingly, as a private keepsake, a family heirloom. Yet a decision awaited her: to follow Mary's path and go further, reshaping the tiara into her own, or to leave it as it was, untouched, a fixed point in royal jewelry history. A decision that would shape not only Elizabeth's image, but how this tiara would be seen by millions around the world. What would she do? Preserve the memory, or begin a new chapter? The answer would begin to unfold very soon. February 1952. A hush falls over the United Kingdom. The country officially enters a period of mourning. King George VI has passed away, and his 25-year-old daughter, until recently the heir presumptive, now becomes head of state, head of the church, the symbol of an entire kingdom. The new queen faces a heavy legacy, a duty she hadn't expected to shoulder so soon. But the nation is watching, the world is waiting, and she must take the first step: to appear before the camera. The first official portraits of Queen Elizabeth II were not meant to be just beautiful images of a monarch. They were a visual manifesto, Photographer Dorothy Wilding, a renowned artist and one of the few entrusted with such a task, was chosen to capture what would later appear on embassy walls, in schools, in passports, on postage stamps, and on banknotes. And at this critical moment, when the world was accustomed to seeing a monarch in a heavy, imposing crown, the new queen made a subtle, almost revolutionary choice. She wore a tiara instead. And not just any tiara, the girls of Great Britain and Ireland. That choice wasn't about fashion, it was about symbolism. A crown represents power, a tiara, dignity. And in 1952, Elizabeth wasn't presenting power, she was presenting her willingness to serve. A tiara, unlike a crown, doesn't overpower the face. It reveals it. It creates a portrait not of a ruler, but of a person. This was the image of a new kind of monarchy, calm, restrained, stripped of pomp, but not of inner strength. In Wilding's portraits, Elizabeth looks young, composed, and quietly assured. Her hair is neatly styled, her gaze direct, her shoulders square. The tiara gleams like a halo of light encircling her head. It doesn't overshadow her face, it frames it. There is no heavy gold, no ornate crosses, no scepter. There is only her and the legacy she was taking on. That image quickly became iconic. Elizabeth wearing the girls of Great Britain and Ireland tiara spread across the world. That is how an entire generation came to remember her, not in a gilded crown, but in a delicate, radiant band of feminine strength, passed from hand to hand, from era to era. The tiara became not only the symbol of the new Elizabethan age, but its visual heart. And so the tiara, once given as a token of love and hope, became an inseparable part of the monarchy's historic face, a face that would go on to appear on stamps, medals, passports, and currency. But this was only the beginning of its second life. Ahead lay fame, recognition, and an unexpected transformation into the most iconic jewelry motif of the 20th century. From the very moment Queen Elizabeth II's portrait wearing the girls of Great Britain and Ireland tiara first entered the public sphere, the piece ceased to be just part of a private collection. It became a symbol of an era, of stability, of constancy in a world where everything else was changing. But what made it truly iconic wasn't grand appearances, state banquets, or royal balls. It was reproduction. This image was chosen for the most widespread and recognizable forms of state symbolism: postage stamps, currency notes, coins, and banknotes. And not just in the United Kingdom. The entire Commonwealth, from Canada to Australia, from New Zealand to the Caribbean, saw and kept seeing Her Majesty in that tiara. It's hard to fathom how many times over the decades this portrait adorned with that tiara passed through the hands of ordinary people. It wasn't just framed in palaces, it lived daily in wallets, in pockets, on envelopes, in documents. And each time someone sent a postcard, received a change, or paid for something, that familiar image returned again. The calm face of the Queen, framed by the soft sparkle of diamonds and the perfect symmetry of a jeweled masterpiece. One of the most defining moments in this visual journey was the Bank of England's £5 note redesign in 1990. Artist and designer Roger Withington created a new portrait of the Queen, and at its center, the same tiara. No heavy ornaments, no distractions, minimal, regal, instantly recognizable. That portrait would appear on British banknotes for nearly 3 decades, right up until the monarchy changed hands in 2022. But why this tiara? Why not a more massive, more dazzling, or rarer one? The answer is both simple and brilliant. Because this one had balance. A balance between majesty and humility, between elegance and strength. It didn't demand attention, it enhanced. Its silhouette was easy to recognize, even in miniature. Its sparkle didn't blind, it lingered in memory. And its story of women, of public giving, of hands passing it on, made it universal and deeply human. Over time, the tiara stopped being merely a jewel. It became a visual anchor. People who didn't know its name still recognized its shape. Citizens of other countries with no direct connection to it still felt respect for its image. And millions around the world remembered the queen not by her crown, but by that delicate diamond line across her forehead, her clear gaze and upright posture. In silence, without words, this piece of jewelry became part of civilization's visual memory. But the story of the tiara didn't end there. On the contrary, it was about to change once more. Because, as we already know, its design held more than met the eye. Ahead was a turning point, one that would again reshape its appearance. At first glance, the Girls of Great Britain and Ireland tiara appears to be a single, monolithic piece, a glittering halo wrapping around the head like a crown of light. But that's just the visible part. Hidden within its structure lies one of the most elegant secrets in royal jewelry history, a subtle duality that's far more than just clever engineering. The tiara was originally designed with two tiers. Its upper portion, adorned with scrolls and diamond motifs, could be detached from the base and worn as a standalone piece, a thin, light headband known as a bandeau. This wasn't just a decorative feature. It was a way to make the piece more versatile, adaptable to moods, moments, and styles. While Queen Mary often wore the tiara in its full form, Queen Elizabeth II, who inherited it, frequently opted for the bandeau version, just the delicate, graceful line that was barely there, yet deeply expressive. Why? Because Elizabeth's style was restraint, simplicity, and refined grace. She had no need for ostentatious glamour or exaggerated grandeur. She favored the details that enhanced femininity without overshadowing dignity. The bandeau fit that aesthetic perfectly. It framed the face without crowding it, without demanding attention, directing focus instead toward the eyes of the woman who bore the weight of a nation. But times changed. By the late 1960s, tastes had shifted. Fashion had grown bolder. Public appearances called for new emphasis. And in 1969, Elizabeth made a quiet but meaningful request. She asked Gerard's jewelers to reunite the two parts of the tiara. After more than 50 years of existing as separate pieces, the tiara was restored to its full form, with its diamond base reinforcing the architectural lightness of the entire structure. This wasn't just a stylistic update, it was a gesture, a return to origins, a statement that in monarchy, change matters, but so does continuity. This reunion inspired Gerard's designers with a new wave of creativity. The patterns used in the tiara's base, alternating round and lozenge-shaped diamonds, strict and almost architectural, became the foundation of one of their most iconic design motifs. Thus was born the Windsor line, and later the Albemarle collection, where the tiara's classic forms were reinterpreted into asymmetric, modern, dynamic compositions. Transformation, flexibility, hidden complexity, these became central themes in Gerard's late 20th century design philosophy. And at the very heart of this new approach was the Girls of Great Britain and Ireland tiara, not just a jewel, but a creative wellspring, a laboratory of form that could be broken apart and reassembled, like a mosaic echoing the rhythm of time. So one design decision, the detachable upper tier, became more than a convenience for a queen. It became a starting point for an entire generation of designers. And if once the tiara lived only on the head of a monarch, now it lived on in collections and reinterpretations and styles worn by women around the world. Yet even as its form evolved, its essence remained. And ahead lies another twist, because the jewel once thought forever tied to one queen unexpectedly reappeared on another. When people talk about the crown jewels, they usually mean weight, value, brilliance. But the Girls of Great Britain and Ireland tiara holds its worth not just in carats. Its power lies in its details, in its shape, in the line that became more than decoration. It became a visual code of power, a style of an era, a legacy instantly recognizable, even without explanation. And all of that comes from one defining element. Look closely at the tiara, and the first thing you notice is the rhythm. Neat, almost musical repeats of scrolls, like waves. But look deeper, through the sparkle of diamonds, through the soft curves, and it becomes clear. This is not just ornament. These are stylized heraldic lilies, or fleur-de-lis, an ancient symbol of royal authority originally tied to the French court and later seamlessly absorbed into British royal symbolism. A mark of purity, legitimacy, divine right, it adorned crowns, robes, seals, and coats of arms. In this tiara, the fleur-de-lis isn't just part of the pattern, it's woven into the foundation itself, as if the very idea of monarchy were embedded into every facet. The scrolls are not random. They follow a strict rhythm. Every diamond has its place. The geometry serves meaning. The form serves a purpose. This isn't romantic whimsy. It's order. It's not flair. It's system. That's exactly why this piece is so highly regarded at Gerard. Claire Scott, the house's director of design and development, once remarked in an interview, "The Girls of Great Britain and Ireland tiara is instantly recognizable. It's a jewel that speaks without speaking. It's part of the Queen's face, her image, her status. But it's more. It's a symbol of the state, of its continuity, of its dignity." Gerard's jewelers took this foundation and turned it into a language of its own. The tiara's motifs were reborn in rings, earrings, brooches. The Albemarle collection emerged, where heraldic shapes were reimagined into abstract compositions, diamonds, circles, woven lines. All of it, descendants of the original 1893 form, now unexpectedly fashionable more than a century later. The idea of the tiara effect isn't just visual strategy. It's the power of recognition, when the shape of a jewel becomes a sign, a code, something you can't mistake. Like the silhouette of the Eiffel Tower, like the Queen's profile on a stamp, like the arc of diamonds across Elizabeth II's forehead. This tiara is no longer just a piece of jewelry. It's part of the visual language of a nation, and that's where its immortality lies. Because even if it disappears from state dinners, even if monarchs change, even if crowns are redesigned, the shape will remain in the collective memory. And that means it will live on. And yet, jewels are not only symbols, they're also gestures. Who wears them? How? And when? And ahead lies one of the most unexpected chapters yet. The tiara reborn in the hands of another woman on a new head with the same brilliant echo of history. In the autumn of 2022, when news of Queen Elizabeth II's passing broke, the world fell silent. It wasn't just the loss of a monarch, it was the end of an era. 70 years of stability, restraint, and quiet grandeur came to a close. And among the thousands of photographs, archival clips, and tributes that filled every screen, one image kept resurfacing: the serene face of the Queen wearing the Girls of Great Britain and Ireland tiara. That image seemed frozen in the collective memory, a symbol of an age to which we could now return only in thought. Then, a year after the monarch's passing, in October 2023, public attention was once again drawn to that very jewel. Camilla, wife of King Charles III, appeared at an official reception in London, and she was wearing that tiara. No flashiness, no exaggeration, Quite the opposite. A restrained, almost austere image, yet powerful in its message. The tiara made a second appearance just 2 months later at the annual Diplomatic Corps reception at Buckingham Palace. This wasn't a fashion choice. It was a gesture of continuity. There had been no advance notice that Camilla would wear the piece. No press releases, no statements, no previews. But once the photos surfaced, the effect was immediate. Newspapers, social media, and television lit up with discussion. And at the center, not just Camilla, but the tiara itself. Viewers, accustomed to seeing it only on Elizabeth, suddenly realized it was still alive. No fanfare, no drama, just quietly continuing its journey through time. And surprisingly, the public reaction wasn't critical, it was warm. Those who knew the tiara only from portraits and currency felt a spark of recognition, as if something familiar had gently returned to view. It wasn't mimicry. It wasn't an attempt to replace Elizabeth's image. It was a continuation, a jewel that had traveled from Mary to Elizabeth, now passed to Camilla, retaining its dignity and meaning. In her own way, Camilla made a significant statement. She didn't reach for something radically new. She didn't set herself against the past. She chose a symbol, and in doing so, showed reverence for tradition. Wearing the same tiara as the queens before her, she became part of the same jewelry narrative, where each chapter is written by a different woman, but always in the same language. And so the legend returned. Not to a museum, not to an archive, not to a display case, but to life, to motion, to light. And perhaps this is the true secret of jewels of such magnitude. They don't disappear, they wait. They wait for the moment to shine again, on a new head and a new chapter, carrying the same inner meaning, the same unwavering line drawn through centuries. Can a royal tiara ever feel close? Not as a picture on a banknote, not as a museum piece behind glass, but truly close as an experience, a personal moment where for just a second you feel part of history. Surprisingly, yes. Today, in the very heart of London, at Garrett's flagship boutique on Albemarle Street, any guest invited for a traditional afternoon tea can come face-to-face with a legend. Among the rustle of vintage catalogs, between mirrors reflecting past and present, there's a special display case. Inside, an archival model of that tiara, not the original, but an absolutely exact replica, crafted from the same designs, using the same materials, with the same attention to detail. And then, the incredible happens. You walk in, take your seat in a high-backed chair, and they bring you the jewel once worn by queens. It's gently placed on your head. In that moment, there are no crowds, no photographers, no history books with their rigid rules. There is only a feeling. Silence. Light refracting through the stones, and the sudden realization you're looking in the mirror and you're not just seeing yourself, you're seeing a reflection of how, for centuries, women have carried dignity, composure, and quiet strength. This isn't a show, not an attraction, not marketing. It's an invitation to live a moment once reserved for the very few. And that's the tiara's greatest transformation. It's no longer just for monarchs, it's for anyone who can feel the beauty of time. Here, the bridge from past to present isn't a metaphor, it's real. A jewel made over a century ago continues not only on the heads of queens, but in the hands of craftsmen, in the eyes of guests, in every gesture that echoes the lines of Mary, Elizabeth, and Camilla. That's why jewels of this level never fade away, because they breathe with the times. They're not afraid of change. And even as crowns pass, portraits shift, and dynasties rewrite their stories, some things remain. The girls of Great Britain and Ireland tiara isn't just a treasure, it's memory. It's a shape that holds the gaze of time. It's the rhythm of elegance untouched by calendars. It's an era, one you can still put on and feel, even for a moment, as if it's yours. And if you've enjoyed this journey through time, symbols, and jewels, don't forget to hit like. It helps us know you're with us. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next royal treasure, and click the bell to be first to know when a new chapter is released. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next story of Royal Jewels.